Hello, dear one, and welcome to Seth's Sleep Sanctuary. My name is Seth, and tonight I want to take your hand, not literally, but gently through the hush of storytelling, and lead you into a place where rest and wonder meet. You've found a quiet space, away from the noise of the world. Here we light a soft candle for your spirit. Here we let ancient stories unfold like lullabies beneath the stars. In this sacred journey, we'll travel through the beginnings of time, through gardens and rivers, through deserts and dreams. We'll walk beside shepherds, prophets, and kings. We'll visit the manger, stand near the cross, and rise with hope at the empty tomb. But more than that, we'll find ourselves. Because this story isn't just about what happened. It's about what still whispers in the heart of the weary. So, get comfortable. Let your pillow become your resting altar. Let your breath slow. Let the quiet in. And if I may ask you something, just before the story begins, which part of the story lives inside you tonight? Is it the waiting of Abraham? The courage of Esther, the longing of the prophets, the faith of Mary, or maybe the quiet hope of someone simply ready to rest? Wherever you are, and however you've come, this sanctuary is for you. Now, close your eyes, dear soul. Let me tell you a story, and may peace find you here. Good night. In the quiet before all beginnings, before the stars danced, before the moon hummed her lullaby, there was only a warm stillness, a hush so deep it wrapped the whole of possibility in its embrace. And within that sacred hush, the one who dreams all dreams whispered to the nothingness, not in thunder or fire, but in love. A love so pure that it opened the first door of time. And so, the beginning began. Let there be light. And light came, not harsh or blinding, but soft, like the first smile between a mother and her newborn child. It shimmered and played, curling around the edges of darkness like a golden shawl drawn over sleeping shoulders, and the one saw that this light was good. So the light was gently set apart from the shadows, not as enemies, but as twins with different tasks. The light would cradle the day, the darkness would comfort the night. And so, time took its first breath. As light and night swayed into their places, the one turned attention to the waters, mysterious, shimmering, and deep. From their endless dance, a space was formed. The skies above, like a stretched blanket for stars yet to be born, and the waters below, cradling secrets and stories waiting to awaken. The one looked again, dreaming land into being. The waters were hushed into places so land might rise. Gentle hills, wide valleys, and quiet places where seeds might one day rest. It was soft, fertile, and full of promise. And from the breath of love, grass began to whisper over the hills. Trees stretched like dancers, leaves unfurling to greet the light. Flowers bloomed not in haste, but slowly, as if each petal remembered a lullaby from the beginning of time. The land, now dressed in green and golden colors, sighed with quiet joy. In the sky, the one painted with purpose, placing two lights, one great to watch over the day, and a gentler silver one to guard the night. The sun and the moon, partners in an eternal waltz, were joined by glittering stars, like tiny thoughts of wonder scattered across the heavens. Each star was placed with care, like a name whispered in the heart of the divine. Then the waters stirred. Life began to shimmer beneath the surface. Fins flashed like silver secrets, and fish of every kind darted and danced. Whales sang low songs that echoed through the deep, and dolphins leapt with joy like children in play. Above, the air responded. Birds rose on invisible paths, their wings tracing prayers in the sky. Their songs, delicate and free, filled the world with melodies not yet named. Upon the land, a gentle stir began. Creatures of every kind took form, some tall and strong, some small and clever. Lions with soft roars and sleepy eyes, elephants with wisdom etched into their pace, deer that tiptoed through forests, and rabbits that burrowed into dreams. All were crafted with care, with the joy of a storyteller painting characters in a tale meant for bedtime. But something was still missing. So the one knelt low, as close as breath to earth, and with tenderness shaped a being, not from stars or fire, but from soil, from sacred dust kissed by light. And into this being the one breathed, not just air, but spirit, memory, longing, and love. The human opened his eyes, and for the first time, the earth saw itself. His breath mingled with wind, his skin with clay, his heart with wonder. He was not a god. He was not a beast. He was something in between, a bridge. And the one smiled, for this, too, was good. Yet, even as he walked among the trees and named the animals, a soft ache stirred within him. He was surrounded by beauty, yet none shared his dreaming heart. So, while he slept, the one reached once more into the quiet. From within him, not from outside, not from above, was shaped a companion, not just a helper, but a mirror, a being of grace and laughter, of strength and softness. She opened her eyes, and when he saw her, something settled inside him. Not because she completed him, but because she reminded him he was not alone. Together they walked the garden. Eden, a place not fenced, not guarded, but filled with peace. Rivers flowed with stories, trees bore fruits of every flavor, and a certain tree stood in the middle, not with menace, but with mystery. It held the knowing of good and not good, of what builds and what breaks. The one asked only that they trust, that they walk in wonder and not awaken too soon the heavy knowledge of sorrow. But the whisper of curiosity is powerful, and in time a creature came, clever, slithering, soft-spoken. It spoke not with fangs, but with questions. Why not taste? Why must you not know? And so the woman touched, tasted, and shared. The moment passed like the wind, quiet but irreversible. The garden did not shatter, but it changed. The trees were still trees, the rivers still flowed, but something in their hearts dimmed. They felt the weight of awareness, the chill of being exposed. They covered themselves, not from shame of body, but from the loss of innocence. The one came gently, not storming in, but walking in the cool of the day. And the question was not, "What have you done?" but "Where are you?" Not of location, but of heart. The trust had been fractured, and so the garden became memory. They were not cursed, but sent forth, still loved, still watched over, but now learning to walk in a world with both pain and joy. Their days would be full, their nights uncertain, but always the one remained near. And so the world continued. The woman bore children, first a son, then another, Cain and Abel. And even in this new world, the ache of the garden lingered. Cain grew restless, comparing his gift to his brother's, allowing shadows to grow in his heart. And in one terrible moment, he raised his hand against Abel, and the earth drank tears again. But even Cain, with his trembling soul, was not abandoned. He wandered, marked not with vengeance, but with mercy, and new children came. The world expanded, cities rose. Music echoed through tents. Metal was shaped into tools. And always a thread of the garden lived on, through kindness, through memory, through longing. As generations passed, so did the hearts of many drift. The world grew crowded with noise, with cruelty, with people forgetting the whisper that once brought light. The one watched with sorrow, not wrath. And among them, one heart stood out. Noah, a man of quiet obedience, who still remembered how to listen. Noah walked not with pride, nor with loudness, but with steady feet and quiet eyes. He did not build temples or shout on mountains. He simply listened. While others mocked the sky and forgot how to look up, Noah kept wondering. He saw the clouds changing in strange patterns, the wind shifting its song, and he heard the voice, not booming but calm, speak to his heart. And the message was not of destruction, but of renewal. The earth had become heavy with sorrow. Songs once sung with joy were now twisted. The laughter of children was lost beneath the noise of greed. The land itself groaned, tired from bearing the weight of human forgetfulness. Yet even here, the one chose not to erase everything, but to preserve a seed, a dream, a family. So Noah was told to build something no one had ever seen before. An ark, not a ship, not a fortress, but a cradle for life. Long and wide, sturdy and strong, shaped like a resting hand cupped in protection. And though the skies still smiled with sun, Noah began to build. Wood by wood, board by board. The sound of hammering was his lullaby, his prayer. His neighbors laughed. "What is this foolish thing?" they said. "Where is the sea, Noah? Where is your storm?" But he did not answer them, not with words. His silence became a message. His hands, calloused and cracked, told a story of faith without proof. And then, one day, the animals began to arrive, not in chaos, not in terror, but in peace. 2 by 2 they came. Birds fluttered down and perched near the ark's doorway. Lions padded softly, their eyes full of trust. Turtles dragged their shells patiently, while gazelles leapt in slow, graceful arcs. Every creature came not from fear, but from some quiet knowing, as though they too had heard the whisper of the coming change. Noah's family helped him prepare. His wife, his sons, and their wives, each soul became a thread in the great weaving of salvation. And when the last pair entered, the door was not slammed shut by Noah's hand, but gently closed by the one who watches all. Then came the rain. Not a drizzle, not a whisper, but a weeping sky, mourning what had been lost. The heavens opened wide, and the fountains of the deep sighed upward. It rained for 40 days and 40 nights, a sacred cleansing, a holy sorrow. The ark rose not like a ship charging forward, but like a leaf on a river, carried by grace. Inside, there was no panic, only waiting. The world outside became quiet. Trees vanished beneath the waves. Hills bowed down to the flood. But within the ark, peace remained. The animals rested. The humans whispered prayers, and Noah gazed out into the endless water, waiting for a sign. And finally, it came. First, a dove returned with nothing, circling once before vanishing into the gray. Then another day passed, then another, and then, on a morning when the sky blushed with soft pink, the dove returned with an olive branch in her beak. Not a tree, not a forest, but a promise. A small green miracle cradled between feathers. Hope had found a way. The waters slowly fell. Mountains peeked like shy children through the mist. The ark settled on quiet ground. And when Noah stepped out, he did not run. He knelt, and he built an altar, not to boast, but to give thanks. The scent of offerings rose into the sky, and the one breathed it in, not like smoke, but like a memory of love returned. A new covenant was formed, not carved into stone, but painted across the heavens. A bow of colors stretched from cloud to cloud, soft as a lullaby, eternal as a mother's embrace. Never again, the one whispered. Never again like this. And the rainbow became a story in the sky. Time moved onward like a river in dream. Noah's children bore children. Families became tribes, and once again the earth filled with life. But with life came pride. With pride came ambition. And soon the people said to each other, "Let us build a tower. Let it rise so high it touches the stars. Let it make our name eternal." So they gathered bricks and climbed upward, not for worship, but for glory. Their tongues were one, their speech united. But the one watching knew their hearts. Not evil, no, not wicked, but forgetful. They wished to climb to heaven without understanding it. So the one touched their words and turned them into rivers of language, each flowing in its own direction. Confusion was not punishment, it was protection. The tower was never finished. The people scattered, each taking a story with them. Among those scattered hearts, there lived a man named Abram. He was not mighty, not a king, not a warrior, but he listened. And one evening, as stars began to wink open in the sky, he heard the one speak, not through wind, not through fire, but through hope. "Leave," said the voice. "Leave all that is familiar. Leave your father's land. Walk where I will show you. I will make your name a blessing." So Abram left, not because he knew where he was going, but because he trusted who was calling. With him went his wife Sarai, graceful and wise, and his nephew Lot, a younger man eager for prosperity. Together they journeyed through fields and valleys, mountains and deserts, guided not by maps but by faith. They camped under stars. They built altars from stone, and wherever they paused, Abram gave thanks. Yet the journey was not without shadows. Hunger came, and they sought shelter in foreign lands. Sarai was taken into a king's house, her beauty seen but not her story. Yet even there the one intervened, returning her unharmed and stronger in spirit. They returned to their journey, richer in lessons. Lot chose his own path, settling in a green valley filled with cities. But not all that is green brings peace. The cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, though rich in splendor, had lost their kindness. Their voices were filled with cruelty, and their gates closed to strangers. Meanwhile, Abram heard again the promise, this time clearer. "You will have children," the voice said, "more numerous than the stars." And Abram looked up. He saw them, not just lights in the sky, but generations, laughter, footsteps, lives. But he was old. Sarai was older. The promise seemed too far. So Sarai, with weary heart, offered her maid Hagar to bear a child. And Hagar bore a son, Ishmael, wild and strong, destined to become a great people. But the promise to Sarai remained. One morning, the one changed their names. Abram became Abraham, meaning father of many, and Sarai became Sarah, princess. A laughter was placed in their hearts, and not long after, in her womb. At last, Isaac was born. He came not like thunder, but like sunrise, quiet and warm. The old woman laughed, not in disbelief, but in wonder. "Who would have told me," she said, "that I would nurse a child?" Her arms held not just a baby, but a fulfilled promise. Isaac, the boy of laughter, grew with the calmness of the morning sun. His hair was soft as sheep's wool, and his eyes mirrored the warmth of his father's heart. Every footstep he took reminded Abraham and Sarah that miracles do not always arrive with thunder. They often come wrapped in gentleness, in waiting, in wonder. The boys' laughter filled their tent like sweet music, but the days were not always soft. One day, Abraham was visited again by the voice, the one who had walked with him beneath the stars. This time, the message was harder to understand. "Take your son," the voice whispered. "Not just any son, but your only son, the one you love, the one who fills your old heart with joy. Go to the mountain I will show you, and there, offer him." The words did not roar, but they rang deep inside Abraham's spirit. And though he didn't understand, he obeyed. The next morning, before the sun had even stretched its light across the hills, Abraham saddled his donkey. He took 2 servants, split the wood for the offering, and quietly called to Isaac. Together they walked, step by silent step. The boy asked no questions at first. He looked at the trees, the stones, the sky, and finally he asked, "Father, we have the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb?" And Abraham, steady but trembling inside, answered softly, "The one will provide." Up the mountain they went. At the top, Abraham built an altar. His hands were gentle, as if arranging a bed. He placed the wood carefully, and then, with a heavy heart, he turned to Isaac. The boy did not run. He trusted. As his father bound him, he looked up, not with fear, but with love, as if understanding something beyond the moment. Abraham raised his hand, but before he could do anything, a voice rang out, "Abraham, Abraham." He froze. "Do not harm the boy," the voice said, like wind rushing through leaves. "Now I know you trust me fully." And there, caught in a nearby thicket, was a ram, its horns tangled in branches, waiting. Abraham wept, not just from relief, but from a sacred joy. He untied Isaac and placed the ram upon the altar instead. The offering was not about blood, it was about faith. Trust was the true gift. From that day, the mountain was called "The One Will Provide," and they descended, father and son, their bond stronger than before. Time passed like drifting clouds. Sarah, whose arms had once been empty, now held memories instead of a child. She grew old like a candle burning to its last glow, and one day she slept and did not awaken. Abraham wept for her, burying her in a quiet cave surrounded by trees. But life flows onward. Isaac grew into a man, gentle and quiet like the fields he walked through. And Abraham, now older than most could imagine, knew his son needed companionship, a love to walk beside him. So he called his faithful servant and made him promise under oath to find a wife for Isaac, not from the nearby cities, but from Abraham's own kin, from the land of his beginnings. The servant took 10 camels and journeyed far, holding the prayer of his master in his heart. And when he reached a well outside a distant town, he whispered to the heavens, "Let the girl who offers me water, and then offers water to my camels, be the one." Before he even finished the thought, a young woman approached. Her name was Rebecca. Her eyes sparkled with kindness. Her hands moved with grace. She saw the stranger and, without hesitation, lowered her jar. "Drink," she said. And then, as if drawn by an unseen thread, she said, "I will draw water for your camels too." The servant knew. His heart danced like firelight. He bowed low and thanked the one who guides footsteps. Rebecca returned with him, leaving her family with courage in her chest. When Isaac saw her walking through the fields at dusk, something in him softened. She veiled her face, and he welcomed her not just into his tent, but into his soul. They became one, their love not loud but deep. And in her arms, Isaac found comfort after his mother's passing. As years passed, Abraham finally rested. His breath slowed, like a river coming to its final bend. He was gathered to his ancestors, buried beside Sarah, leaving behind a legacy carved not in stone, but in faith. Isaac and Rebekah longed for children, but seasons passed without cries of infants in their tent. Isaac prayed, not with demands, but with longing. And at last, Rebekah felt life stir within her. Twins, but not peaceful. They wrestled even in her womb, as if two nations fought inside her belly. She asked the one, "Why is this happening?" And the whisper came, "Two peoples grow within you. One will rise above the other." When they were born, the first came out red and hairy. They named him Esau. The second followed, grasping his brother's heel. They named him Jacob. As boys, they grew like opposite winds. Esau loved the wild, the hunt, the open fields. Jacob preferred quiet tents, cooking pots, and quiet thinking. Their father loved Esau's ruggedness. Their mother, Rebekah, cherished Jacob's stillness. One day, Esau returned from hunting, famished and tired. Jacob was stirring lentil stew. The smell was rich and comforting. "Give me some of that red stew," Esau said. Jacob, with a clever glint in his eyes, replied, "First, sell me your birthright." Esau laughed, thinking only of his hunger. What good is a birthright if I die of hunger? And so, for a bowl of stew, the older gave the younger his inheritance. Later, as Isaac aged, his eyes dimmed. He called Esau to his bedside. "Hunt for me. Prepare my favorite meal, then I will bless you." Rebekah heard this and quickly called Jacob. She dressed him in Esau's clothes, covered his arms with goat fur, and prepared the meal. Isaac, blind and unsure, touched the arms, smelled the garments, and said, "The voice is Jacob's, but the hands are Esau's." He blessed Jacob, giving him the inheritance of heaven's dew and earth's richness. Soon after, Esau returned, and when he learned what happened, his voice broke like a storm. "Is there no blessing left for me?" he cried. From that day, hatred grew. Rebekah, fearing what Esau might do, sent Jacob away to her brother Laban, far across the land. Jacob left at dawn with nothing but a staff and his mother's kiss. On the first night, he lay on the ground with a stone for a pillow. As he drifted into sleep, a dream unfolded. A ladder reaching from earth to the heavens, and angels climbing up and down. At the top stood the One, shining like moonlight, speaking gently, "I am with you. I will keep you. I will bring you back." Jacob awoke with tears. "Surely this place is sacred," he whispered. He poured oil on the stone and named the place Bethel, House of God. And so, with hope in his heart and stars above, he continued his journey. Jacob journeyed on, the sky his roof and the earth his path. His heart carried both hope and worry, but the memory of the dream lingered. Angels moving up and down a ladder that connected the heavens and the soil beneath his feet. It made each step feel guided, each breath wrapped in something sacred. At last, Jacob arrived in the land of his uncle, Laban. The moment he saw a well surrounded by shepherds and flocks, he paused. The air was still, as though time itself was holding its breath. Among the shepherds was a young woman, graceful and kind-eyed, leading sheep with the quiet strength of someone who knows their worth. Her name was Rachel. When Jacob saw her, his soul stirred. He rolled the stone away from the well, not to impress, but because something inside him told him she would one day be part of his story. He wept upon meeting her. Tears of exhaustion and destiny mingled into one. Rachel ran home to tell her father, and Laban came running to greet Jacob. He welcomed him as kin, and soon Jacob found himself not a wanderer anymore, but part of a new family. He worked alongside them, his hands busy, his heart fuller now. But his eyes never left Rachel. One evening, Laban asked him, "What shall your wages be?" And Jacob, without hesitation, replied, "I will work 7 years for your daughter Rachel." And so he did. Day after day, Jacob worked with diligence, not counting time, for love had made 7 years feel like a moment. The sheep were tended, the fields nourished, and each dusk he looked forward to seeing Rachel, her laughter like wind chimes, her footsteps a familiar comfort. At the end of the 7 years, there was a wedding feast. Music filled the tents, wine was poured, and lamps glowed into the night. But when Jacob awoke the next morning, it was not Rachel by his side. It was Leah, Rachel's older sister. Jacob was shocked. He went to Laban with a heart full of confusion. "Why have you done this to me?" Laban's voice was calm. "In our land, the younger is not married before the elder, but if you finish this bridal week, you may also have Rachel, for another 7 years of work." And Jacob agreed, not out of bitterness, but because his love for Rachel was steady, rooted deep. So he worked again, quietly, faithfully, and Rachel became his wife too. Leah, though not the one Jacob chose, was not forgotten by the heavens. The one saw her sadness and blessed her with children. Reuben was born, then Simeon, then Levi and Judah. Each child, a thread woven into the promise long ago whispered to Abraham. Rachel, beloved but barren, watched with aching eyes. Her prayers were quiet but deep. Time passed, and finally the heavens opened to her as well. Joseph was born, his name meaning "may he add," a child of laughter, favor, and destiny. Jacob's life became full. Sons were born, flocks increased, and the man who once slept on stones now led a family like a wandering tribe. But the winds of change began to stir. Jacob sensed it, an urging to return home. He spoke with Laban. "Let me go," he said, "that I may return to my land." But Laban hesitated. He had grown wealthy through Jacob's work and did not want to lose him. They agreed on new wages, and through clever tending of the flock, Jacob prospered. Strong lambs, speckled and streaked, multiplied under his care. But Laban's heart grew jealous, and Jacob knew it was time to leave. One night, under the veil of starlight, Jacob gathered his family, his flocks, his servants. Quietly, they slipped away. But Laban discovered their departure and chased after them. When they met, words were exchanged, heavy with the weight of family and betrayal. But instead of war, they chose peace. Stones were gathered and stacked, a silent witness to a vow. Neither would cross the line of the stones in hostility. A meal was shared, blessings were spoken, and Jacob walked away free. But ahead lay another shadow. Esau, his brother, the one he had deceived so long ago. Fear wrapped itself around Jacob's heart. Would Esau come with anger? Would he remember the stolen blessing? Jacob sent gifts ahead, herds and flocks, each with a message. "These belong to your servant Jacob. They are a gift to my lord Esau." And still, fear lingered. That night, Jacob stayed alone. The sky was vast, and the river nearby whispered old stories. Then came a man, or was it an angel, who wrestled with Jacob until dawn. They moved like wind against wind, strength against purpose. Neither yielded. As the first light painted the sky, the stranger touched Jacob's hip, and he limped, yet still clung. "I will not let you go," he whispered, "unless you bless me." And so the stranger did. "Your name is no longer Jacob," he said, "but Israel, for you have struggled with the divine and prevailed." Jacob limped into the sunrise, forever changed, not just in body, but in spirit. When he saw Esau approaching with 400 men, his breath caught. He bowed 7 times, but Esau did not strike. Instead, he ran to Jacob and embraced him. They wept upon each other's shoulders, brothers once again. They spoke gently. Esau tried to refuse the gifts, but Jacob insisted. "Seeing your face," he said, "is like seeing the face of the One, full of favor." They parted in peace. Jacob settled once more, building altars, naming the places where he had seen heaven meet earth. His children grew, their laughter rising through the tents, but shadows would soon creep again. Rachel bore one more child, Benjamin, but the birth was hard. On the road, under the open sky, she gave her last breath and was buried beside the path. Jacob built a stone pillar to mark her grave, his heart heavy with both love and grief. Joseph, Rachel's firstborn, became his father's delight. A boy of dreams and vision, he walked with a grace that set him apart. Jacob gave him a coat, a garment woven with many colors, a robe that shone with the father's affection. But Joseph's dreams stirred envy among his brothers. Dreams of sheaves bowing, of stars kneeling, they whispered among themselves, "Shall we bow to him?" One day, Jacob sent Joseph to find his brothers in the fields. When they saw him coming, his robe catching the sunlight, their hearts grew dark. "Here comes the dreamer," they said. And so began a sorrow that would lead to salvation. Joseph came walking through the fields, unaware that his brothers' hearts had already turned against him. His robe of many colors danced in the wind behind him, and in his eyes was only joy. The kind of joy that blooms when a child is deeply loved. But love can sometimes cast shadows in the hearts of those who feel unseen. The brothers whispered among themselves. Jealousy tightened its grip. "Let us kill him," one said. But Reuben, the eldest, stepped forward. "Number, do not shed his blood. Throw him into this empty pit in the wilderness." Reuben said this not because he agreed with their rage, but because he hoped to return later and rescue Joseph. So when Joseph arrived with his arms open and his voice warm, they stripped him of his beautiful robe and cast him into the pit. The sun stared down silently. The pit was dry. There was no water. There was no kindness. And then, while they sat and ate bread, a caravan of traders appeared in the distance. Camels bearing spices, balm, and myrrh, journeying toward Egypt. Judah spoke then, his voice calculating. "What gain is there in killing our brother? Let us sell him. After all, he is our own flesh." And so they did. For 20 pieces of silver they handed Joseph over. The traders bound him gently, unaware of the story they were now part of. As Joseph looked back, his brothers turned away. The pit became a memory, the robe stained with dust. The brothers took that robe, dipped it in goat's blood, and brought it to their father. "Is this your son's coat?" they asked. Jacob looked at it, his heart cracking. He tore his garments and fell to the ground in mourning. "My son is dead," he cried. I will go down to the grave in sorrow." No one could comfort him. But Joseph lived. He was brought into Egypt, a land of pyramids and incense, of temples and gold. There, he was sold to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard. And though he was a slave, Joseph's hands carried a blessing. Everything he touched flourished. Potiphar noticed and placed him in charge of his entire household. Joseph worked with honor, and in time he found favor even among the Egyptians. But favor often attracts envy, and Potiphar's wife, seeing Joseph's beauty, tried to lure him. "Day after day," she whispered. But Joseph, though young, was rooted in wisdom. He refused, saying, "How can I do this great wrong and sin against the one who sees all?" One day, when no one else was in the house, she grabbed his robe. He fled, but his robe remained in her hands. She cried out, twisting the story. When Potiphar returned, his face darkened. And though he did not kill Joseph, he cast him into prison. Even there, in the shadows of stone walls and locked gates, Joseph did not despair. The One was with him. The keeper of the prison soon placed him in charge of the other prisoners. Joseph walked the dim halls like a candlelight, quiet, watchful, kind. And in that prison he met two men, once servants of Pharaoh. One was the cupbearer, the other a baker. They had both offended Pharaoh and were thrown into the same place as Joseph. One night, each of them dreamed. The next morning, Joseph noticed their troubled faces. "Why do you look so sad?" he asked. "We have dreamed," they said, "but there is no one to interpret." Joseph replied softly, "Interpretations belong to the divine. Tell me your dreams." The cupbearer spoke first. "In my dream, I saw a vine with 3 branches. It budded, blossomed, and produced ripe grapes. I took the grapes, pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and placed it in his hand." Joseph smiled. "The 3 branches are 3 days. In 3 days, Pharaoh will restore you to your position." The baker, hopeful, told his dream next. "I had 3 baskets of white bread on my head. In the top basket were pastries for Pharaoh, but birds came and ate them." Joseph grew quiet. "The 3 baskets are 3 days. In 3 days, Pharaoh will lift your head, but not in restoration. You will be hanged, and birds will eat your flesh." 3 days later, all came to pass. Joseph had asked the cupbearer one thing. "Remember me when it is well with you. Speak of me to Pharaoh." But the cupbearer forgot. 2 whole years passed. The sun rose and set over Joseph's prison. Time moved like honey, slow and thick. Yet still he waited. And then Pharaoh dreamed. 2 dreams, one of 7 fat cows by the river, followed by 7 thin cows who devoured them. Then 7 healthy ears of grain, followed by 7 withered ones who consumed the full ones. None of Pharaoh's magicians or wise men could explain the dreams. Then the cupbearer remembered. "I know someone," he said. Joseph was brought out of the dungeon, washed and shaved, clothed in fresh linen. He stood before Pharaoh, not as a slave, but as a vessel of peace. "Can you interpret dreams?" Pharaoh asked. Joseph answered, "It is not in me, but the one who gives peace will answer you." He listened quietly to the dreams and spoke gently. "The dreams are 1. 7 years of plenty will come across Egypt, followed by 7 years of famine. Let Pharaoh store grain during the years of plenty, so the people may live during the famine." Pharaoh and all his servants were amazed. Can we find such a man in whom the Spirit of the divine dwells?" And so Joseph was lifted from prisoner to prince. Pharaoh placed a ring on his hand, a robe of fine linen on his shoulders, and a gold chain around his neck. He rode in a chariot, second only to Pharaoh himself. And Joseph ruled wisely. He gathered grain like sand, storing it in vast cities. During the 7 years of plenty, he prepared the land for what was to come. And when the famine arrived, the people cried out, but there was bread. Not only in Egypt, but throughout all lands the famine reached. And in Canaan Jacob said to his sons, "I hear there is grain in Egypt. Go and buy for us, that we may live." And so the brothers came, bowing before Joseph, not recognizing the brother they had sold. Joseph knew them. He spoke harshly at first, hiding his heart. He tested them. "You are spies," he said. "You must bring your youngest brother to prove your story." He held one brother, Simeon, as a pledge and sent the others back. Jacob wept. "You would take Benjamin too? I have lost Joseph. Simeon is gone. Must I lose Benjamin also?" But hunger pressed them. Judah, once the one who sold Joseph, now offered his own life as guarantee. "If I do not bring him back, let the blame be on me forever." And so Benjamin came. When Joseph saw him, his heart ached. He left the room and wept. Joseph wiped his eyes and returned to the room. His face was calm, but inside him, oceans stirred. He saw his brothers seated before him, older now, worn by hunger and time, yet still unaware that the young boy they had thrown into a pit now sat upon the throne of Egypt. He arranged one final test. He ordered a grand feast, placing the brothers at the table in order of their birth. They looked at each other, puzzled. For how could this Egyptian lord know such things? Benjamin, the youngest, was given 5 times more food than the rest. Yet no jealousy rose, only wonder, only unity. Joseph watched, and when the feast ended, he instructed his steward to fill their sacks with grain, but to place his silver cup in Benjamin's sack. At dawn they set out for home, but before they had gone far, the steward chased after them. "Why have you repaid good with evil?" he cried. "Why have you stolen my master's cup?" The brothers were stunned. "Let the one who is found with it die, and the rest of us will become slaves." The sacks were searched. From the eldest to the youngest, the steward opened them one by one, and there, in Benjamin's sack, gleamed the silver cup. They tore their clothes in grief. They returned to the city not with pride, but with despair. They stood before Joseph. Judah stepped forward. His voice trembled, not with fear, but with love. "Take me," he said. "Let me remain as your slave instead of the boy. If he does not return, our father will die of sorrow." And that was the moment Joseph could bear no more. He sent the servants away. Only his brothers remained. His voice cracked like thunder softened by tears. "I am Joseph," he said. "Is my father still alive?" Silence. The brothers froze, unable to speak. Joseph stepped forward, his eyes full of the ache of years. "Do not be afraid," he whispered. "You meant it for harm, but the one meant it for good. I was sent ahead of you to preserve life." And then he wept. They fell upon each other, not as enemies, but as brothers reborn. Tears washed away years of guilt. Joseph embraced Benjamin. He embraced Judah. He kissed them all. The palace, once filled with courtly silence, now echoed with the healing sound of reunion. Word reached Pharaoh, and he was pleased. "Tell your family to come," he said. "They shall dwell in the land of Goshen. They shall not lack anything." So Joseph sent wagons, gifts, and clothing. He gave his brothers the best of Egypt's bounty. But to Benjamin he gave more: silver, garments, and affection that spilled beyond words. They returned to Canaan with trembling joy. Jacob, old and wearied by grief, saw the wagons coming. His sons ran to him. "Joseph is alive," they shouted. "He rules over all Egypt." Jacob's heart stopped. At first he did not believe them, but when he saw the wagons, when he heard their voices woven with truth, his spirit revived. "It is enough," he whispered. "My son Joseph lives. I will go and see him before I die." So Jacob set out. As he approached Egypt, he stopped in Beersheba and offered sacrifices. And that night, the one spoke to him in a dream. "Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt," the voice said. "I will make of you a great nation there. I will go with you, and I will bring you up again." And so Jacob continued. 70 souls, sons, grandsons, daughters, all descended into Egypt, carrying with them not just their belongings, but a promise whispered to Abraham so long ago. When Joseph saw his father approaching, he went out to meet him. They embraced, and Jacob wept upon his son's neck for a long time. "Now I can die," he said softly, "for I have seen your face, and you are alive." Joseph brought his family before Pharaoh. The king welcomed them and gave them the best of the land: green pastures in Goshen, far from the noise of the cities. And there they settled. The famine continued, but Egypt endured. Joseph opened the storehouses and fed the people. When their money ran out, they traded their livestock. When that, too, was gone, they offered their land. And Joseph managed it all, not with cruelty, but with wisdom. He set in place a system so that none would starve. And his father, Jacob, lived in peace. 17 years passed. Then Jacob, old and full of days, called Joseph to his side. "Swear to me," he said, "that you will not bury me in Egypt. When I die, carry me back to my fathers." Joseph swore, and then Jacob sat upon his bed and blessed his sons. He called each one by name, and over each he spoke words, some firm, some tender, all shaped by truth. But to Joseph he gave a double portion, blessing the sons born to him in Egypt, Manasseh and Ephraim, as his own. And then Jacob breathed his last. The room fell silent. Joseph kissed his father's face, wept, and prepared him for burial. With Pharaoh's permission, a great procession traveled back to Canaan. Chariots, horsemen, servants, all honoring the man whose journey began with a dream and ended in peace. Jacob was laid to rest beside Abraham and Isaac in the cave of Machpelah. When they returned to Egypt, Joseph's brothers grew afraid again. "Perhaps now he will repay us for what we did," they whispered. They sent a message, begging forgiveness. Joseph wept when he heard it. "Do not fear," he said. "Am I in the place of the one? You meant harm, but the divine meant it for good, to save many lives. I will care for you and your children." And he did. He lived long. He saw his children's children. He watched the tents of his people grow, their flocks multiply, their language shift, their laughter echo. Before he died, Joseph gathered his brothers. "The one will surely visit you," he said, "and bring you up from this land to the land sworn to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. When that day comes, carry my bones with you." And with those words, he rested. The sands of Egypt covered his body for a time, but not his memory. His bones would wait. His story would wait. Because this was not the end. This was only the beginning. The promise still breathed. And so Joseph rested in the land that was not his birthland. The one who had once dreamed beneath a sky of betrayal now closed his eyes in peace beneath a sky of fulfillment. His brothers, their children, and their children's children lived on in Egypt, strangers in a land that fed them, but never truly held them. Time, like a slow stream, moved onward. The faces of Jacob and Joseph faded from the world of the living, but their memory passed from tongue to tongue, told around fires, sung in lullabies, carved into the hearts of wandering shepherds and growing tribes. Joseph's bones remained in Egypt, but his soul looked eastward, to the land promised to his fathers. His final wish, "Carry me up from here," was not a plea for escape, but a call to remembrance. A reminder that even in the richest of lands, the heart longs to return to the place of beginning. The soil where faith was first planted, where stars were first counted, and where promises were born. And Egypt, once a land of refuge, slowly began to shift. The Pharaoh who had known Joseph passed away, and another arose, a man who did not remember the dreamer who had saved a kingdom. He looked upon the children of Israel, now a great multitude, and fear entered his heart. "They are too many," he said. "If war comes, they may rise against us." So what had been blessing became burden. The people who once brought order and wisdom were turned into slaves. They were forced to build cities, to make bricks without straw, to bow under the sun that once blessed their ancestors with visions. But the more they were afflicted, the more they multiplied. And so, under the hot, amber sun of Egypt, a strange resilience bloomed. The Israelites, though bent beneath the weight of burdens not theirs, refused to break. Their hands were raw and calloused from stone and straw, but their songs still rose, soft and steady like the murmur of a hidden spring in the desert. They whispered stories to their children about a time before bricks and lashes, of a shepherd named Abraham, of Isaac's laughter, of Jacob's ladder, and Joseph's dreams. These tales were not just memories. They were maps of hope, lamps in the night. The new Pharaoh, cloaked in gold and shadow, watched them with suspicion. He walked among marble pillars and warred in his mind. "Their numbers swell like the Nile," he murmured to his advisers, whose faces bore the same tight lines of fear. "We must break their spirit before they rise." So he made life bitter. The taskmasters grew crueler. Whips cracked like thunder in the morning air. Mothers wept softly behind straw walls as their husbands came home bleeding, their shoulders trembling not from pain, but from the effort to hide it from their children. Yet still, the people multiplied. Children were born in silence, sometimes hidden among reeds, their first cries hushed by trembling lips and tear-streaked cheeks. They were tucked into baskets lined with prayers and hope. The midwives, Shiphrah and Puah, stood as secret warriors in linen garments, refusing the Pharaoh's command to end Hebrew lives at birth. These women, they lied boldly, give birth too quickly. The babies arrive before we do. And the heavens, silent for generations, watched. Among the reeds of the Nile, the river that once nourished life now witnessed grief. For the Pharaoh had gone further. "Every son born to the Hebrews," he declared with cold finality, "shall be cast into the water." And so the Nile became a grave. But also it became a cradle. For on one quiet morning, when the world still held its breath, a Levite woman wrapped her newborn son in soft cloth, kissed his brow, and placed him in a basket coated in pitch. Her tears fell like dew upon the woven reeds. She tucked a prayer into the lining, ancient words from her grandmother, a whisper of protection from the God of Abraham. The basket floated gently, kissed by the breeze, swayed by the current. The baby, unaware of danger, cooed and blinked beneath a sky as blue as freedom. His sister, Miriam, small and fierce, watched from the riverbank, heart pounding like a drumbeat of prophecy. And then, footsteps. The daughter of Pharaoh, wrapped in silks and gold, descended the steps of the riverbank with her maidens. She heard the cry, a note like a bell, soft but insistent. Drawn by something beyond reason, she parted the reeds and saw him. A child with eyes that glimmered like dawn. A Hebrew, one of her maids said, a warning in her voice. But Pharaoh's daughter felt something stir in her chest. Not fear, but tenderness. "No," she replied, lifting the basket into her arms. "A gift." And so Moses, the child of burden and prophecy, was taken into the house of the very man who ordered his death. The river did not swallow him, it delivered him. Miriam stepped forward, bold and clever. "Shall I find a nurse from among the Hebrew women to care for him?" she asked, and Pharaoh's daughter, still cradling the child, nodded. And so the mother who had released her son into the river's mercy was summoned to the palace to nurse him. Her arms, once empty, were full again. Her lullabies, once whispered in fear, now filled marble halls with warmth. She named him Moses, drawn out of the water. Time, once again, flowed. Moses grew amid luxury, learning the language of Egypt, walking among scholars, priests, and soldiers. He dressed in linen dyed with lapis, read scrolls, stood beneath colonnades, and yet something in his soul tugged elsewhere. He saw the whip marks on the backs of men who looked like his kin. He heard the cries, saw the eyes of the old and young alike clouded by chains. One day, rage overtook him. A taskmaster struck a Hebrew slave, and something ancient stirred in Moses' blood, a storm of justice. In a moment, the taskmaster fell dead beneath Moses' hands. Fear clutched his chest. The royal blood that once shielded him now felt like a cage. He fled. Through sandstorms and silence, he wandered east into Midian, a land of rocks and sheep, of quiet winds and forgotten places. There he found Jethro, a priest of the old ways, and Zipporah, Jethro's daughter, gentle-eyed and strong. He married, tended sheep, and for years lived quietly, the echo of Egypt fading like a dream. A bush burned, not with fire that consumed, but fire that called. Moses, barefoot and bewildered, approached the flame, and the voice spoke. "Moses, Moses." He trembled. "Here I am." "Take off your sandals, for the place where you stand is holy ground." The voice was not thunder. It was not wrath. It was remembering. The same voice that had whispered to Abraham under stars, to Jacob in a wrestling night, to Joseph in a prison cell. "I have seen the affliction of my people," said the voice. "I have heard their cry. I know their suffering, and I have come down to deliver them." Moses' heart beat like a drum. The wind paused. "You will go to Pharaoh," the voice said, "and you will bring my people out of Egypt." Moses shook his head. "Who am I to do this?" The flame did not flicker. I will be with you." And so the slow stream of time surged once more. Back in Egypt, the chains clinked louder. The sky above was heavy. The people, still bowed beneath burden, whispered dreams of rescue. In the night, the elders gathered under cracked rooftops, their voices low. "Is the God of our fathers still with us?" they wondered. And, as if in answer, rumors reached them of a man returning from the desert. A man with eyes like lightning and words like thunder. A man who once lived in Pharaoh's palace and now walked with a staff that split seas and souls alike. Moses. He returned not with an army, but with a voice full of the divine. "Let my people go." Pharaoh laughed. The gods of Egypt stood tall in gold and granite, and this shepherd dared challenge them? So Pharaoh increased the burden. "No straw," he declared, "but the same number of bricks." But still, hope had stirred. Aaron stood by Moses, a brother in flesh and fire. Together they performed signs. The Nile turned to blood, frogs leapt through palaces, gnats rose from dust. But Pharaoh's heart, like stone, would not yield. The people watched with trembling awe. Who is this God who speaks through Moses? They did not yet know, but they would. And so, by candlelight and whispered prayers, the Israelites began to prepare. A final night was coming, a night of silence and blood, a night of escape, the first Passover. They smeared lamb's blood on doorposts, not as magic, but as memory, as obedience, as trust. And when the shadow passed over Egypt, wailing filled the night. But in the homes of the Hebrews there was light, there was breath, there was trembling, but not death. And Pharaoh, broken by grief, finally whispered the words long awaited. "Go." So they went. Not in chaos, but in order. Families with bread on their backs, staffs in hand, hearts pulsing with fear and freedom. The sea parted. The wind howled. And a people once bound in chains walked through walls of water with sand beneath their feet and stars above their heads. And the journey truly began. But that is for another night. Now let the candles flicker gently. Let your breath soften. You have walked through dreams and deserts, through rivers and palaces, through grief and glory. Let your spirit rest beneath the stars of old, for the God of Abraham watches still. The whispers of Joseph still rise in the night wind. The hope of Moses still burns in quiet hearts. Sleep now, little one. Sleep with the comfort of promises unbroken. Sleep, for the dawn will come. And so the waters stood like walls carved by the breath of the Almighty, and the Israelites walked through the sea, not in panic, but in awe. The sand, still damp and soft beneath their feet, held the weight of a people who had known nothing but bondage for generations. Behind them, the thunder of chariots echoed like a warning, but before them was a new horizon, open, wild, and untouched by chains. Children clung to their mothers, wide-eyed and quiet, as if their very presence might break the spell of freedom. Old men leaned on staffs and whispered prayers of gratitude. And Moses, staff in hand, beard swaying with the sea breeze, walked like a shepherd leading a flock not just toward a land, but toward a new way of being. When the last sandal stepped onto dry ground, the sea sighed once more and returned to its bed. The waters closed behind them, and the pursuing army was swallowed in silence. Pharaoh's power, once mighty and unshakable, was left behind in the watery grave. And for the first time in 400 years, The children of Israel were no longer slaves. They were wanderers. They were free. There, on the other side of the Red Sea, under a sky painted with the soft hues of dusk, Miriam, sister of Moses, took a timbrel in her hand. Her voice, bright and fierce, rose like a flame. "Sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously." And the women danced. They danced not just in celebration, but in remembrance. Every step was for a grandfather lost to lashes, every twirl for a child born under oppression. Their feet thudded against the earth like thunderous joy. Laughter, real and deep, echoed across the sands. But freedom is not easy, and the desert is not soft. 3 days they walked without water. The sun baked the land. Their lips cracked. Their tongues stuck to the roofs of their mouths. The children cried, the animals stumbled, and the people grumbled. "Why did you bring us out here to die?" they asked Moses, fear rising like a tide. And then they found water at Marah. But the water was bitter. Hope, so recently born, faltered. Whispers of Egypt, of leeks and onions, of shelter and predictability rose once more. Moses cried out to God, and God answered. A tree, simple, ordinary. Moses threw it into the water, and the bitterness melted away. Sweetness filled the air, and the people drank deeply. They rested at Elim, where 12 springs bubbled gently, and 70 palm trees swayed in the breeze. There, the nights were cool, and the stars felt near enough to touch. Children laughed again. Old men sang. Women hummed lullabies as they prepared meals from what little they had. Freedom began to feel real. But the journey was long, and the wilderness was a testing ground. Their food ran low, and once again, fear began to twist their hearts. "In Egypt," they said, "we had bread. We had meat. Why did you bring us here to starve?" Moses sighed, and again the sky answered. One morning, as dew settled over the ground like a silken blanket, something strange appeared. Fine flakes, white like frost, scattered across the sand. The people stared, confused. "What is it?" they asked. Moses smiled. "It is manna, the bread God has given you." They gathered it with careful hands. It tasted like wafers made with honey, sweet, unexpected, heavenly. Each morning the manna fell. Each evening quails came and settled around the camp. Meat and bread enough for each day. Not too much, not too little, just enough. In that rhythm the people learned trust. One day at a time, one meal at a time, one miracle at a time. But the desert also taught them silence. At night, when the wind hushed and the stars blinked above like watchful eyes, stories passed between tents. Grandfathers spoke of Abraham's promise. Mothers recalled Jacob's dream. Children, nestled between blankets made of goat hair, drifted to sleep listening to tales of Joseph's coat, the basket in the Nile, and the God who saw everything. But even in freedom, fear is not easily forgotten. There were enemies in the wilderness. The Amalekites came, raiders with cruel hearts and sharpened blades. Joshua, young and brave, led the charge. Moses, old and weathered, climbed a hill and raised his staff toward the heavens. As long as his hands were lifted, the battle turned in Israel's favor. But his arms grew tired. So Aaron and Hur stood on either side of him, supporting him when he could no longer hold himself up. Together they held up hope, and Israel prevailed. Not by might, not by numbers, but by the quiet power of unity, of faith, of lifting one another. Afterward, they built an altar and named it Yahweh Nisi, the Lord is my banner. They journeyed further into the wilderness, and on a quiet morning, when the sun still yawned behind the hills, a strange cloud settled atop a distant mountain. Sinai. It loomed high and sacred, cloaked in mystery. God called Moses to the top. The people waited below, watching thunder roll over the peaks, flames licking the sky. They trembled. But Moses ascended, disappearing into the cloud. For 40 days he remained, and the mountain spoke, not with noise, but with words that carved themselves into stone and soul, words that would shape a nation. You shall have no other gods before me. Honor your father and mother. Do not steal. Do not lie. Remember the Sabbath. Do not covet. These were not merely rules. They were the gentle boundaries of a new life, a life of order, of justice, of reverence. When Moses returned, his face shone, not with pride, but with a light that could not be hidden. The people, awed and afraid, listened. But still, the human heart is a strange thing. While Moses had been away, fear had taken root. We don't know what has become of him, they whispered. So they fashioned a golden calf, not because they forgot God, but because they did not yet understand him. Moses, heartbroken, shattered the tablets. But God, patient and ever yearning, invited him to return to the mountain. I will write them again, he said. I am merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love. And he did. So Moses came down once more, this time not just with stone, but with a tent, a place for God to dwell, not in heaven, not on a mountain, but among his people, the tabernacle. Every stitch, every beam, every curtain, crafted with care, gold, linen, acacia wood, incense, and oil. The people gave what they had, not because they were wealthy, but because they were willing. The Ark of the Covenant was placed inside, holding the tablets, a jar of manna, and Aaron's budding staff. Above it, 2 cherubim spread their wings, and the presence of God filled the tent. Cloud by day, fire by night, guiding them, protecting them, loving them, and the journey continued, through deserts and doubts, through silence and song, through rebellion and reconciliation. But they were not alone. Each step, though weary, was wrapped in purpose. Each night, though cold, held the warmth of promise. And though the land of Canaan still lay beyond hills they could not yet see, they walked as a people no longer owned by Pharaoh or fear, but by hope. Now, as you close your eyes, imagine the soft desert breeze on your cheek. Hear the low hum of a people resting, dreaming of a land flowing with milk and honey. Feel the glow of firelight flickering just outside your tent, where stories still rise like incense to the stars. The God of Abraham walks still. The fire of Moses' calling still warms the heart. The manna still whispers, "There is enough." And you, too, are part of this story. Sleep now, beneath the shelter of the Almighty. Sleep in peace, wrapped in the gentleness of ancient dreams. Sleep, for the journey continues, and morning will bring new manna. And so the waters stood like walls, carved by the breath of the Almighty, and the Israelites walked through the sea, not in panic, but in awe. The sand, still damp and soft beneath their feet, held the weight of a people who had known nothing but bondage for generations. Behind them, the thunder of chariots echoed like a warning, but before them was a new horizon, open, wild, and untouched by chains. Children clung to their mothers, wide-eyed and quiet, as if their very presence might break the spell of freedom. Old men leaned on staffs and whispered prayers of gratitude. And Moses, staff in hand, beard swaying with the sea breeze, walked like a shepherd leading a flock not just toward a land, but toward a new way of being. When the last sandal stepped onto dry ground, the sea sighed once more and returned to its bed. The waters closed behind them, and the pursuing army was swallowed in silence. Pharaoh's power, once mighty and unshakable, was left behind in the watery grave. And for the first time in 400 years, the children of Israel were no longer slaves. They were wanderers. They were free. There, on the other side of the Red Sea, under a sky painted with the soft hues of dusk, Miriam, sister of Moses, took a timbrel in her hand. Her voice, bright and fierce, rose like a flame. "Sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously." And the women danced. They danced not just in celebration, but in remembrance. Every step was for a grandfather lost to lashes, every twirl for a child born under oppression. Their feet thudded against the earth like thunderous joy. Laughter, real and deep, echoed across the sands. But freedom is not easy, and the desert is not soft. 3 days they walked without water. The sun baked the land. Their lips cracked. Their tongues stuck to the roofs of their mouths. The children cried, the animals stumbled, and the people grumbled. "Why did you bring us out here to die?" they asked Moses, fear rising like a tide. And then they found water at Marah. But the water was bitter. Hope, so recently born, faltered. Whispers of Egypt, of leeks and onions, of shelter and predictability rose once more. Moses cried out to God, and God answered. A tree, simple, ordinary. Moses threw it into the water, and the bitterness melted away. Sweetness filled the air, and the people drank deeply. They rested at Elim, where 12 springs bubbled gently, and 70 palm trees swayed in the breeze. There, the nights were cool, and the stars felt near enough to touch. Children laughed again. Old men sang. Women hummed lullabies as they prepared meals from what little they had. Freedom began to feel real. But the journey was long, and the wilderness was a testing ground. Their food ran low, and once again, fear began to twist their hearts. In Egypt, they said, we had bread, we had meat. Why did you bring us here to starve? Moses sighed, and again the sky answered. One morning, as dew settled over the ground like a silken blanket, something strange appeared. Fine flakes, white like frost, scattered across the sand. The people stared, confused. What is it? They asked. Moses smiled. It is manna, the bread God has given you. They gathered it with careful hands. It tasted like wafers made with honey, sweet, unexpected, heavenly. Each morning the manna fell. Each evening quails came and settled around the camp. Meat and bread, enough for each day. Not too much, not too little, just enough. In that rhythm, the people learned trust. One day at a time, one meal at a time, one miracle at a time. But the desert also taught them silence. At night, when the wind hushed and the stars blinked above like watchful eyes, stories passed between tents. Grandfathers spoke of Abraham's promise. Mothers recalled Jacob's dream. Children, nestled between blankets made of goat hair, drifted to sleep listening to tales of Joseph's coat, the basket in the Nile, and the God who saw everything. But even in freedom, fear is not easily forgotten. There were enemies in the wilderness. The Amalekites came, raiders with cruel hearts and sharpened blades. Joshua, young and brave, led the charge. Moses, old and weathered, climbed a hill and raised his staff toward the heavens. As long as his hands were lifted, the battle turned in Israel's favor. But his arms grew tired. So Aaron and Hur stood on either side of him, supporting him when he could no longer hold himself up. Together they held up hope, and Israel prevailed. Not by might, not by numbers, but by the quiet power of unity, of faith, of lifting one another. Afterward, they built an altar and named it Yahweh Nissi. The Lord is my banner. They journeyed further into the wilderness, and on a quiet morning, when the sun still yawned behind the hills, a strange cloud settled atop a distant mountain. Sinai. It loomed high and sacred, cloaked in mystery. God called Moses to the top. The people waited below, watching thunder roll over the peaks, flames licking the sky. They trembled. But Moses ascended, disappearing into the cloud. For 40 days he remained, and the mountain spoke, not with noise, but with words that carved themselves into stone and soul. Words that would shape a nation. You shall have no other gods before me. Honor your father and mother. Do not steal. Do not lie. Remember the Sabbath. Do not covet. These were not merely rules. They were the gentle boundaries of a new life, a life of order, of justice, of reverence. When Moses returned, his face shone, not with pride, but with a light that could not be hidden. The people, awed and afraid, listened. But still, the human heart is a strange thing. While Moses had been away, fear had taken root. We don't know what has become of him, they whispered. So they fashioned a golden calf. Not because they forgot God, but because they did not yet understand him. Moses, heartbroken, shattered the tablets. But God, patient and ever yearning, invited him to return to the mountain. I will write them again, he said. I am merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love. And he did. So Moses came down once more, this time not just with stone, but with a tent, a place for God to dwell, not in heaven, not on a mountain, but among his people, the tabernacle. Every stitch, every beam, every curtain, crafted with care, gold, linen, acacia wood, incense, and oil. The people gave what they had, not because they were wealthy, but because they were willing. The Ark of the Covenant was placed inside, holding the tablets, a jar of manna, and Aaron's budding staff. Above it, 2 cherubim spread their wings, and the presence of God filled the tent, cloud by day, fire by night, guiding them, protecting them, loving them. And the journey continued, through deserts and doubts, through silence and song, through rebellion and reconciliation. But they were not alone. Each step, though weary, was wrapped in purpose. Each night, though cold, held the warmth of promise. And though the land of Canaan still lay beyond hills they could not yet see, they walked as a people no longer owned by Pharaoh or fear, but by hope. Now, as you close your eyes, imagine the soft desert breeze on your cheek. Hear the low hum of a people resting, dreaming of a land flowing with milk and honey. Feel the glow of firelight flickering just outside your tent, where stories still rise like incense to the stars. The God of Abraham walks still. The fire of Moses' calling still warms the heart. The manna still whispers, "There is enough." And you, too, are part of this story. Sleep now beneath the shelter of the Almighty. Sleep in peace, wrapped in the gentleness of ancient dreams. And so the days melted into weeks, and the weeks became months. The wilderness, once unfamiliar and cruel, began to hum with its own rhythm, a quiet song known only to those who walk in faith, not by sight. The Israelites had become a people between places, not yet home, but no longer enslaved. Every morning they woke to the hush of manna falling like frost, soft and patient. It was there with the dew, delicate and dependable. The children would run to gather it, their giggles bouncing off the tents as the sun rose behind distant hills. And every night, as fire floated above the tabernacle like a watchful lantern, the elders sat by glowing embers, telling stories that had begun before pyramids touched the sky. "Moses," a little boy once asked, his voice sleepy and small, "what is this place called?" Moses, looking at the desert stretching in every direction, replied softly, "This, little one, is the land of waiting, but beyond it lies the land of promise." The child didn't fully understand, but he nodded and curled into his blanket, feeling safe. That's what the wilderness had become, a cradle for hope. Not easy, but sacred. There were days when the people grew restless. The path ahead was not always clear, and their hearts longed for the stability, even if it had once come with chains. They grumbled, they argued, they asked for more water, more meat, more signs, and each time God met them. Not always with answers, but always with presence. When they were thirsty, Moses struck the rock and water gushed forth, sweet, cool, and abundant, enough to fill every jar, every bowl, every cupped hand. When they cried for meat again, quails came down in such number that the sand itself seemed feathered. Still, they struggled. Faith is not always strong in a barren land. Even the most miraculous of provisions can begin to feel ordinary when repeated too often. Some hearts forgot the Red Sea, forgot the fire, forgot the voice on the mountain. But God remembered them, and He walked with them anyway. The tabernacle stood at the center of the camp, its walls of woven linen fluttering like breath. Inside, the ark rested, guarded by golden cherubim beneath a canopy of embroidered stars. The priests, sons of Aaron, moved quietly, carrying incense, pouring oil, offering sacrifices not just for sin, but for thanksgiving. The people would gather at the entrance, heads bowed, the scent of frankincense filling the air like a promise. And when the cloud lifted, they packed their tents and followed. When it settled, they stayed. Whether for a day, a week, or a year, they moved only when the presence moved. It was a divine rhythm, one that asked for patience and trust, one that whispered, "You are not lost, you are being led." One morning, as dawn painted the horizon with hues of apricot and rose, Moses was called once again. this time not to the mountain, but into the tent. The cloud descended and covered the entrance, and inside the Lord spoke to Moses face to face, as a friend speaks to a friend. There was no thunder, no shaking earth, just quiet. "Moses," said the voice, "you have found favor in my sight. My presence will go with you." And Moses, weary and weathered, replied, "If your presence does not go with us, do not send us up from here." It was a sacred confession. For even with manna and miracles, even with a promise of land and rest, Moses knew, without God, the journey would be meaningless. The wilderness without God was emptiness. But with him, it became a sanctuary. There, in that holy hush, God did something beautiful. He passed before Moses, not in fire, not in thunder, but in goodness. "I am the Lord," he whispered, "merciful and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness." Moses bowed low, his face to the ground, and from that day his heart carried the shape of those words, like tablets etched in spirit rather than stone. The people, too, began to be shaped. Laws were not just given, they were lived. In the mornings, parents taught their children to recite them. In the evenings, they inscribed them upon their doorposts, not as burdens, but as blessings. "Honor your father and mother. Do not steal. Do not bear false witness." Each commandment became a song of identity, a shield, a map, a mirror. But the journey was not without sorrow. There came a day when the people camped near the land of Moab, just east of the Jordan River. They were close, so close to Canaan. But the wilderness had one more chapter to write. One morning, God called Moses to a quiet hill. "Look," said the Lord, "this is the land I promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You may see it, but you shall not enter." Moses said nothing at first. His eyes scanned the horizon, the hills, the valleys, the silver thread of rivers, the soft green of trees. It was beautiful. He did not weep. Instead, he breathed deeply. For he knew his journey was ending, but the story was not. He had brought the people from chains to covenant, from despair to hope. He had held tablets and heard thunder, had walked between fire and cloud. He had failed, yes, but he had also loved deeply. And in the end, that was enough. God buried Moses himself. No grave, no marker, just a life held in the memory of heaven. The people mourned for 30 days. Joshua, strong and humble, stepped forward. The mantle passed. The journey continued. And so, one golden morning, the Jordan parted, just as the Red Sea once had. And the people crossed over, into the land of milk and honey, into vineyards they had not planted, into cities they had not built, into promise fulfilled. But even then, the story did not end. The walls of Jericho fell not by sword, but by song and silence. The sun stood still at Joshua's prayer. The tribes settled, each to their portion, and the tabernacle was set up once more, this time in Shiloh, a place of peace. There the people rested. There the land was quiet. And in that quiet, the elders told stories of the sea that opened, of the manna that fell, of the mountain that glowed. Children grew up hearing of Moses, the man who glowed when he came down from the cloud. They spoke of the God who walked with them in fire and cloud, who gave water from rocks and bread from heaven. And each night, under stars that once counted Abraham's descendants, they whispered prayers of gratitude. Now, dear listener, you rest in your own wilderness. Perhaps your journey is winding. Perhaps you too have left something behind and are not yet where you hoped to be. But know this: the same God who parted seas and walked in fire, the same voice that called Moses from a burning bush, the same hand that fed the people in a barren land, that God is near. He does not change, and He knows the shape of your heart even when you feel lost. So, sleep tonight beneath the soft tent of heaven. Let the stars above you be as the ancient stars, numberless and faithful. Let your breath rise like incense, and your dreams drift like manna. Let your soul settle into the stillness, for you are not alone. The cloud still guides, the fire still warms, the word still speaks. Sleep now. Tomorrow will come, and with it, your daily bread. But tonight, rest. You are safe in the arms of the one who never slumbers. You are beloved, you are remembered, and your journey is holy. And so they entered the land. The journey of sand and song, of tents and thunder, gave way to vineyards heavy with grapes and fields of barley golden in the sun. The land of Canaan, long whispered in lullabies and prophecies, stretched before them like a dream blooming into dawn. No longer were they wanderers. They were home. But as with all homes, this one came with the call to remember. In the beginning, they remembered well. Joshua, faithful servant of Moses and steady hand of God, led them with strength and humility. Under his watch, the tribes spread out: Judah in the south, Ephraim in the center, Zebulun in the north, and others finding their place like stars filling the sky. Each family claimed their portion. They built homes from the stones of the land, planted vineyards and fig trees, raised altars not to idols, but to the Lord who had carried them through wilderness and wonder. The tabernacle remained at Shiloh, a sacred center where the ark rested, a symbol of covenant and closeness. Each year they made pilgrimage. Each season they brought offerings. And around the fires they still told the stories. Fathers would lean in, eyes shining in the firelight, and whisper, "When I was a child, I saw the sea open." Or, "I was there when the manna first fell, white as morning." And mothers would sing, "The Lord is our shepherd, we shall not want." Children memorized not only the laws written on tablets, but the tenderness written on their parents' faces. And yet, time moved forward. As the old generation laid down to sleep in the earth, a new generation arose, one that had not felt the whip of Pharaoh or tasted dew-covered manna. They had not heard Moses speak with God in the fire, nor walked under the cloud by day and fire by night. To them, the wilderness was a story, a chapter, a song. And slowly the remembering faded. It began subtly, a small idol carved in secret, a marriage made with one who worshipped other gods, a festival where the songs of Yahweh were replaced with drums for Baal. The land was generous, but their hearts became forgetful. And so came a time of quiet struggle. The enemies of Israel were no longer empires with chains, but temptations with smiles. The Philistines pressed from the west. The Moabites plotted from the east. The Midianites, once cousins, became conquerors. There were no more walls of fire, no seas opening. only the echo of past miracles and the quiet question, "Where is our God now?" But even in forgetfulness, God did not forget them. He raised up judges, men and women not born of nobility, but called from ordinary life. There was Othniel, brave and just; Ehud, who delivered with stealth and wisdom; and then Deborah. Ah, Deborah. She sat beneath a palm tree, not with a sword, but with wisdom. People came from villages and valleys to hear her settle disputes. She was both prophetess and peacemaker. And when the cries of the people rose again, when their enemies pressed hard, Deborah stood. She called Barak, a warrior, and said, "The Lord will deliver Sisera into your hands." Barak, unsure, replied, "If you go with me, I will go." And Deborah said, gently but firmly, "I will go. But the victory will belong to a woman." And so it was. The army of Sisera was defeated. The iron chariots sank into the mud of God's making, and when Sisera fled, it was Jael, a tent-dweller's wife, who ended his story not with vengeance, but with courage. The song of Deborah echoed through the land. The mountains quaked before the Lord, the One of Sinai. Awake, awake, Deborah. Awake, sing a song. Peace followed, for a time. But again, hearts drifted. So God raised Gideon, a quiet man threshing wheat in hiding. "Who am I?" he asked when the angel appeared. "My clan is the weakest in Manasseh." But God whispered what he has always whispered to the humble, "I will be with you." And with 300 men, jars, and torches, Gideon defeated an army that darkened the hills like locusts, not by might, not by numbers, but by obedience. And yet, even Gideon's story was bittersweet. After victory, the people sought to make him king, but Gideon refused. "The Lord is your king," he said. Still, when he made a golden ephod, a sacred garment, the people began to worship it. Even the good can lead astray when the heart forgets who truly delivers. And so the pattern continued. Peace, forgetting, trouble, crying out, deliverance, then forgetting again. But through it all, God did not forsake his people. One day, during a time of silence and sorrow, there was a woman named Hannah. She had no child, and her heart ached like an empty well. Each year she journeyed to Shiloh and wept before the tabernacle, her prayers like a river without words. One year she whispered a promise, "Lord, if you give me a son, I will give him back to you." And heaven heard. Samuel was born, a child of tears, a child of hope. When he was weaned, Hannah brought him to the priest Eli and left him there, not in abandonment, but in faith. She returned home singing, "My heart rejoices in the Lord. The bows of the mighty are broken, but those who stumbled are girded with strength." Samuel grew in the house of the Lord. One night, as the lamps burned low, he heard a voice, "Samuel." He ran to Eli. "You called?" "No, my son," said Eli. "Go back to sleep." Again the voice came, "Samuel." And again. The third time, Eli's eyes opened. "It is the Lord," he said. "When you hear the voice again, say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" And so Samuel did. And from that night forward, the Lord walked with him. Samuel became the last judge of Israel. He led not with sword, but with truth. But the people, watching the nations around them, asked for something new. "We want a king," they said, "like the other nations." Samuel's heart broke. He prayed. And the Lord said, "They have not rejected you. They have rejected me as their king, but give them what they ask." And so Saul was anointed. Tall, handsome, strong. At first, he walked in humility, but soon pride grew. He disobeyed. He grasped at power. He feared people more than he feared God. And the kingdom cracked. So God whispered to Samuel again, "Go to Bethlehem." There, among sheep and songs, was a boy named David, ruddy-cheeked, harp in hand, shepherd of sheep. "Anoint him," said the Lord, and oil ran down David's brow. Years would pass before he would wear the crown. But even in hiding, in caves and battles, in psalms and silence, David's heart chased after God. When he sang, the heavens leaned in. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies." And when at last he became king, Jerusalem became the city of worship. The ark was brought with dancing and trumpets. The people rejoiced. David, flawed yet faithful, ruled with passion. He sinned, yes, but he repented with tears that softened stone. "Create in me a clean heart, O God," he wrote. His songs became the prayers of generations, and in his lineage the promise would rest. A king would come, not with sword, but with sandals, not on chariots, but on a donkey, not with judgment, but with mercy. But that is for another night. Now, dear listener, rest once more. Let your spirit lie gently beneath the branches of Deborah's palm. Let your dreams dance with the light of Samuel's lamp. Let David's harp sing you to sleep. For this story is not just about kings and prophets. It is about you, about how God walks with those who wait, how he remembers those who forget, how he calls the unlikely and comforts the broken. So breathe deeply. You are not lost in the wilderness. You are seen. You are led. You are loved. And your story is still being written, one sacred, silent night at a time. Sleep now. The God of Abraham still watches. The fire of Moses still glows in the soul. The heart of David still beats in songs. And the whisper that called Samuel still speaks. May you hear it in your dreams. And may peace, deep, sweet, and holy, be your pillow tonight. And after David came Solomon, the boy born not from a story of perfection, but from a tale of grace. His mother, Bathsheba, once wept in shadows, yet her son would rise to build what even David could not, the temple of the Lord. Solomon was young when he became king, and the weight of the kingdom pressed heavily on his shoulders. One night, while the stars drifted over Jerusalem and the city slept beneath the quiet hush of dawn, God appeared to Solomon in a dream. "Ask what I shall give you." Solomon could have asked for anything: riches, lands, a long life, the fall of his enemies. But the young king bowed in his spirit and whispered, "Give me wisdom, that I may know how to govern your people." And the heavens smiled. Because Solomon had not asked for wealth or fame, God gave him wisdom unlike any before him, and riches, and peace, and prosperity beyond imagining. The kingdom of Israel bloomed like a garden after rain. Gold flowed into Jerusalem. Ships arrived with spices and rare woods. People came from distant lands just to hear the king's words. Among them was the Queen of Sheba, cloaked in silk and crowned with curiosity. She came with riddles, and Solomon answered everyone. But Solomon's greatest work was not his palaces, or his writings, or the judgment he rendered with such clarity. It was the temple, the house of the Lord, the dream of David made stone. 7 years it took, thousands of workers, endless supplies of cedar from Lebanon, gold from Ophir, bronze and fine linen. When it was done, it gleamed like sunrise. The inner sanctuary, the Holy of Holies, was lined with gold. 2 cherubim with outstretched wings guarded the Ark of the Covenant. On the day of dedication, the priests brought the Ark into its place, and as Solomon prayed, the cloud of the Lord filled the temple. It was not a fire or a wind this time, but a thick, gentle presence that wrapped the sanctuary in silence. The people fell to their knees, and Solomon stood and lifted his voice. O Lord, God of Israel, there is no God like you in heaven or on earth. Will God truly dwell on earth with man? Even heaven and the highest heaven cannot contain you, how much less this house that I have built. But God honored the house, and the years that followed were golden. Solomon wrote songs, over 1,000. He penned proverbs, sharp and gentle like morning light. He built gardens and studied the stars. He watched ants and eagles, and from each drew wisdom. His words carried through time like a river, still read, still pondered. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. A gentle answer turns away wrath. There is a time for everything under heaven, but even wisdom without devotion can grow weary. And as Solomon aged, the peace around him could not quiet the restlessness within. He loved many women, hundreds, and some came with gods of their own. They asked for shrines, for incense, for altars, and Solomon, once so devoted, gave in. He built high places for foreign gods. He burned offerings not just in Jerusalem, but in hills that had never known the Lord. And the Lord was grieved. So he said to Solomon, "Because you have not been wholly faithful, the kingdom will be torn, but not in your days. For the sake of David, your father, it will remain for now." And so, even in peace, the seeds of division were sown. When Solomon passed, his son Rehoboam became king. The people came to him, pleading for mercy. "Your father was great, but heavy. Make our burden lighter." Rehoboam consulted the elders, and they advised kindness. But he turned to his young friends, who whispered pride into his ears. "My father chastised you with whips," Rehoboam declared. "I will chastise you with scorpions." And the people turned away. 10 tribes, led by Jeroboam, broke off and formed the northern kingdom, Israel. Rehoboam ruled only over Judah in the south. And from that day, the house of David was divided. 2 nations, 1 heart broken in 2, Israel in the north, Judah in the south. Jerusalem kept the temple. But the north built its own altars, made golden calves, and said, "These are your gods." And the drift continued. Kings rose and fell, some just, many cruel. prophets cried out, "Return to the Lord." But their voices were like wind against stone. Elijah came, clothed in camel's hair, fierce and full of fire. He stood alone against hundreds of false prophets, calling down fire from heaven. The sky answered, and the altar was consumed. Still the people wavered. Elijah fled to the wilderness, broken and tired. But even there, God met him. Not in fire, not in earthquake, not in wind, but in a still, small voice. "Return," the voice whispered. "I have preserved 7,000 who have not bowed to Baal." And so Elijah rose again. He passed his mantle to Elisha, who healed waters, multiplied oil, raised the dead. The miracles did not cease, but the people's hearts still faltered. And eventually, judgment came. The Assyrians swept down upon the northern kingdom. Israel fell. Its people were scattered like seeds in the wind. Only Judah remained, for a time. In Judah, good kings and bad kings came in rhythm. Hezekiah, faithful and strong, trusted in the Lord and was delivered from enemies. But after him came Manasseh, dark and cruel, who filled the land with idols and blood. Even when Josiah, the boy king, rediscovered the book of the law and wept, even when he tore down altars and restored the temple, the people's repentance did not last. The prophets cried louder: Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel. They wept over the city they loved. They warned, pleaded, groaned. But the people said, "Peace, peace," when there was no peace. And the Babylonians came. Jerusalem fell. The temple was burned. The ark was lost. The city of God, once clothed in gold and song, now lay in ashes. The people were taken in chains, back into exile, a new Egypt, a new bondage. But even in Babylon, by the rivers where they wept, the voice of the Lord was not silent. "I know the plans I have for you," he said, "plans to give you a future and a hope." And in visions, he showed prophets a valley of dry bones, lifeless, scattered. Then breath came, bone to bone, flesh to sinew, and life returned. The exile would not be forever. 70 years later they returned. Not all, but enough. Zerubbabel rebuilt the temple, smaller, simpler, but sacred still. Ezra read the law aloud, and the people wept. Nehemiah rebuilt the walls of Jerusalem with sword in one hand and trowel in the other. And once more, the people remembered. They sang the psalms again. They kept the feasts. They taught their children. And yet, the silence came. Not exile this time. Not war. But a quiet, long and weighty. 400 years without a prophet. The world changed. Empires rose and fell. Persia, Greece, Rome. Israel became a province. Jerusalem, watched by soldiers in red, the temple remained. But something was missing. Until one night, in a small village, in a stable, a cry, a baby wrapped in cloth and laid in a manger, and the silence was broken. But that, dear listener, is a story for another night. Tonight, let your heart rest in the arms of the God who walks through centuries and stories, the God who parts seas and speaks through whispers, the God who remembers his people even when they forget him. He is not only the God of the mountain, he is the God of the exile, the God of return, the God of rebuilding, and He is here, even now. Let the warmth of His promises settle over you like a blanket. Let the memory of the temple's golden glow light your dreams. Let the prayers of prophets and kings echo softly as you drift into rest. You are not forgotten. You are part of this story. So sleep under the stars that once shone over Solomon's court. Sleep to the rhythm of ancient songs. Sleep, for the word still lives, and the story still continues, gently, faithfully, until dawn. The prophets no longer walked the land. The scrolls were closed. The visions ceased. For 400 years the people of Israel waited, not in slavery this time, nor in exile, but in something quieter, something deeper. They waited in hope. The temple still stood, but it no longer shone with the fire of Solomon's day. The ark was gone. The prophets were silent, and Rome ruled. Soldiers walked the streets of Jerusalem in red armor and iron helmets. Tax collectors knocked on doors. The marketplace buzzed with foreign tongues. The world had grown loud, but God seemed quiet, yet not absent. For even in silence, God is never still. Like a seed beneath soil, unseen but alive, the promise was stirring. In a small village called Nazareth, tucked between olive groves and winding paths, lived a young woman named Mary. She was simple, kind, faithful. Her hands knew the shape of kneaded dough, her heart the rhythm of prayers whispered in twilight. One evening, as the lamp flickered gently and the air smelled of warmed figs, a presence filled the room. Not thunder, not earthquake, but light. And an angel stood before her. "Hail, Mary," the angel said, "full of grace. The Lord is with you." Mary trembled, not in fear, but in wonder. "Do not be afraid," the angel said gently. "You have found favor with God. You will bear a son, and you shall name him Jesus. He will be great, and his kingdom will have no end." "How can this be?" Mary whispered. And the angel replied, "The Holy Spirit will come upon you. The power of the Most High will overshadow you. The child will be holy, the Son of God." Mary bowed her head. "Let it be to me," she said, "according to your word." And in that quiet room, under that humble roof, eternity entered time. Meanwhile, far away, a man named Joseph, descendant of David, quiet and just, was troubled. Mary, his betrothed, was with child. He didn't understand, but he was kind. He decided to release her quietly to avoid shame. That night, he too dreamed. An angel came, saying, "Do not fear to take Mary as your wife. The child within her is from the Holy Spirit. You shall name him Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins." And Joseph awoke with peace. He took Mary into his home, not with grand celebration, not with ceremony, but with faith. And so the journey began. When the time came for the child to be born, the Roman emperor called for a census. Everyone was to return to their ancestral town. So Joseph and Mary traveled to Bethlehem, the city of David. The journey was long. The roads were dusty. The inns were full. The night was cool. And in a stable, beneath a roof of wooden beams and stars, Mary gave birth to her son. She wrapped him in swaddling cloths and laid him in a manger, a feeding trough filled with soft hay. There were no trumpets, no thrones, no fine linens or golden cradles. Just breathe, just starlight, just love. And nearby, on a hillside, shepherds kept watch over their sheep. Their hands were calloused, their eyes weary. They were not kings, not scribes, not rulers. They were ordinary. And yet to them the heavens opened. A light brighter than day surrounded them. And an angel said, "Fear not, for behold, I bring you good news of great joy, which shall be for all people. For unto you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, who is Christ the Lord." Then the sky sang. A multitude of heavenly voices, like wind, like water, like the breath of 1,000 harps. Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace. Peace to those with whom he is pleased. And the shepherds, still breathless, said to one another, "Let us go to Bethlehem." And they found him, wrapped in cloth, lying in a manger, the King of Kings, sleeping. Far in the east, Magi, wise men, watchers of stars, saw something new in the sky, a light unlike any before. It shimmered with purpose. And so they followed, through deserts and cities, through silence and dreams, bearing gifts: gold for a king, frankincense for worship, myrrh for sacrifice. And when they found the child, they fell to their knees, not before a throne, not in a palace, but in the presence of a child who held eternity in his eyes. And they worshipped. Then, warned in a dream, they returned by another way, for a dark shadow had begun to stir. Herod, the Roman-appointed king, feared the whispers of a newborn king. He sent soldiers to Bethlehem, but Joseph, again warned in a dream, took Mary and the child and fled to Egypt. And the Savior who came to set the captives free became a refugee, until Herod died, and the family returned, not to Bethlehem, but to Nazareth, and the child grew. Jesus grew like a tender shoot. He played among the olive trees. He studied the scrolls with curious eyes. He asked questions that stirred wonder. At 12, he lingered in the temple, speaking with teachers who marveled at his understanding. But when his mother found him anxious, he said gently, "Did you not know I must be in my Father's house?" Yet he returned home with her, and waited, until the time came. At the Jordan River, a voice cried out. John, the baptizer, clothed in camel's hair, eating locusts and honey, spoke with fire. "Prepare the way of the Lord. Make his paths straight." And one day, as John baptized the people, Jesus came. John paused. "It is I who need to be baptized by you," he said. But Jesus replied, "Let it be so now, for thus it is fitting to fulfill all righteousness." And as he rose from the water, the heavens opened. The Spirit descended like a dove, and a voice echoed across the water, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." And so it began. Jesus walked the land, not with fanfare, but with compassion. He touched the sick, and they were healed. He opened blind eyes and deaf ears. He fed thousands with bread and fish, and yet hungered himself. He calmed storms with a word, and yet wept at a friend's grave. He taught not from palaces, but from hillsides and boats. "Blessed are the poor in spirit," he said, Blessed are the meek. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. He said, Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. He told stories of seeds and shepherds, of lost coins and prodigal sons, and the people listened. Some followed, some doubted, but all were seen. One night, a Pharisee named Nicodemus came to him in secret, and Jesus said, Unless one is born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. How can this be? Nicodemus asked. And Jesus replied, For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. These words would echo for centuries. They would wrap around hearts in darkness. They would anchor hope. Jesus called disciples, not scholars or nobles, but fishermen, tax collectors, zealots. Follow me, he said. And they did. They walked dusty roads with him. They ate by firelight. They saw miracles, heard laughter, witnessed tears. They saw him transfigured, his face shining, his robes white as light. They heard the voice again, This is my beloved Son. But not all understood, and not all stayed. For the road led not to thrones, but to thorns. One night, in a garden under silver moonlight, Jesus prayed, Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done. And soldiers came. He was betrayed with a kiss, abandoned, mocked, beaten, a crown of thorns pressed upon his brow. And he carried a cross through the streets. Upon a hill called Golgotha, he was crucified. Nails, wood, sky darkening. Father, forgive them, he said, for they know not what they do. And then, it is finished. The earth shook. The veil in the temple tore in two, and the Word, who had been with God from the beginning, was silent, but not forever. 3 days passed, and on the third, as dawn broke and dew clung to the grass, the stone was rolled away. The tomb was empty. Angels whispered, He is not here, He has risen. And the story changed, not ended, not paused, but fulfilled. Jesus appeared, to Mary in the garden, to the disciples on the road, to many more. He spoke peace. He broke bread. He bore the scars. And then, upon a mount, he lifted his hands and blessed them. Go, he said, make disciples of all nations. I am with you always. And he ascended, not in shadow, but in glory. Now, dear listener, close your eyes. Feel the hush of night wrapped around you like a gentle robe. You've walked through deserts and dreams, through kings and prophets, through silence and stars, through the manger, to the cross, to the empty tomb. And this story, this sacred, eternal story, includes you. For the one who calmed storms still speaks peace. The one who healed the broken still mends hearts. And the one who walked out of the tomb still walks with you. So sleep now. Let the whispers of angels soothe your soul. Let the breath of Bethlehem rock you gently. Let the shadow of the cross shelter you. Let the light of resurrection warm your rest. You are known. You are loved. You are part of this story. And the story is not over. It continues through your dreams, your days, your every quiet breath. Sleep, little one, sleep in peace, for the Word is still alive, and morning will come. And so, dear heart, the story reaches its final fold, not with a full stop, but with an open door. For after the silence was broken, and the tomb stood empty, and the risen Christ had walked once more among his beloved, a new journey began. It was not one of conquering lands or building temples. It was one of building hearts, hearts as temples, lives as altars, a kingdom not of walls or armies, but of peace, of grace, of love. It began in a quiet room in Jerusalem, where his friends, once frightened, now waiting, gathered in prayer. And then, like a wind through trees, the Spirit came. Tongues of fire rested upon each head, not to burn, but to ignite, and the timid became bold. The fishermen became voices. The doubters became dreamers. And Peter, who had once denied him, now stood tall and proclaimed, "This Jesus, whom you crucified, God has raised him up." 3,000 hearts awakened that day, not by sword, not by decree, but by love. And so the church was born. Not a building, a people, not brick and stone, but bread shared in homes, not stained glass, but broken hearts healed by grace. They gathered, they prayed, they sang, they wept, they fed the hungry, they clothed the poor, they loved their enemies, they remembered his words. Love one another as I have loved you. And his promise, I go to prepare a place for you. Years passed. Paul, once a persecutor, became a preacher. From Damascus to Corinth, from Philippi to Rome, he traveled, sharing the news that could not be silenced. He wrote letters, so many letters, to friends, to churches, to you and me. Words like lanterns in the dark. Nothing can separate us from the love of God. Rejoice always. In weakness, he is strong. And he too, like so many before him, gave all he had, not to gain glory, but to reflect it. Others followed. Some sang in prisons. Some whispered prayers in catacombs. Some faced lions, fires, emperors. But always, always, the story endured. Not because it was loud, but because it was true. And now the story lives in you. Yes, you. Right here, in this soft moment, with your head resting gently on your pillow, with the hush of night like a blanket, and the moonlight like a lullaby. You are part of the sacred unfolding. Because the story was never just about Abraham or Moses, Mary or Paul. It was always about love. A love that shaped the stars. A love that walked in the garden. A love that climbed a hill. A love that broke bread and broke chains. And that love whispers even now, "Come to me, all who are weary, and I will give you rest." Not just sleep, but soul rest, heart rest, the kind of rest that says, "You are safe now, you are seen, you are home." So, as you lie here tonight, in the stillness of this holy hour, let yourself drift through all the echoes of the story, from the garden where God walked with his children, to the flood where hope floated upon the waters, to the wilderness where manna fell like grace, to the throne rooms and temples, the prophets and kings, to the stable, the manger, the carpenter's hands, to the cross, the silence, and the empty grave, to the fire of Pentecost and the prayers of the saints, to now, to this very breath. Let the rhythm of the ages soothe you. Let the heartbeat of heaven rock you. Let the gentle spirit wrap around your soul like a warm shawl. You are not wandering in the wilderness. You are not standing outside the gate. You are inside the story. Held, loved, eternal. So close your eyes now. Breathe in the fragrance of sacred history. Feel the hush of angels at your side. Know that the God who wrote the galaxies also wrote your name in love. And before you drift fully into sleep, I ask you this, softly, gently, from all of us at Seth's Sleep Sanctuary. What part of the story do you carry within you? Is it Abraham's waiting, Moses' wondering, Ruth's loyalty, David's song, Mary's trust, Peter's boldness, or perhaps it is your own, a new chapter being written tonight beneath the stars. Share it with us if your heart desires, and if not, carry it quietly into your dreams. We are listening, and we are with you. Sleep now, beloved. Sleep in the company of sacred dreams. Sleep where the shepherd still watches his flock by night. Sleep where grace is not a word, but a resting place. Sleep, for you are cradled in the arms of the everlasting. And when morning comes, let it find you wrapped in peace. The story will continue, and so will you. Good night, sweet soul. You are home.